Off the Hook, airing on offthehooksports.com, your home for real news, real opinions, and what really matters about Tennessee athletics. The Off the Hook podcast at offthehooksports.com or Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, or wherever you go for your favorite podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, iHeart. Like, share, follow, subscribe. Off the Hook with Dave Hooker starts now.
All right, here we go. John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel and the USA Today Network, brought to you by Big Orange Phillies and Files Automotive Group. Tell you more about them here momentarily. We've got a lot going on, and that includes, well, we got some rankings. How about that? So week one of football under our belts, a full week, so there's a lot to talk about. Want to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We'd greatly appreciate that. And John, week one in the books, your takeaway before we get to where the SEC teams stack up and the AP coaches poll.
Well, my main takeaway, there were a lot of great football games. I recorded that Pittsburgh, West Virginia game after watching Tennessee play and watched that. And that was probably as good a game as you'll see all year. It was just tremendous intensity. Game went back and forth. Then you had LSU, Florida State in the Superdome, just a wild finish, kind of chaotic. Everybody's ripping on Brian Kelly after one game. But so I thought it was a really good reminder of how much fun college football is.
Great. I want to get to Tennessee and what you thought about their performance against Ball State and then heading into Pitt. First, remind everybody that Viles Automotive Group is all about integrity when it comes to their selection. It is unparalleled right there on Callahan Road. They also have an absolute fantastic car care department, and they appreciate your business, and that's Viles Automotive Group right there on Callahan. So, John, let's talk about the Vols, but first, your most inappropriate moment in a press conference that you can recall, because Brian Kelly goes to his press conference at LSU on Monday after a loss, and a couple of the media members were late, and they walk in and he says, "Oh, holiday weekend, are we running a little bit late?" And some lady speaks up and says, "Well, if you'd win, we'd be on time." Your thoughts?
I thought that was inappropriate for a reporter to do that. I mean, Brian Kelly he was just kidding around in the context of what had just happened and how much heat Brian Kelly was taking on social media. I thought it was a little out of place. Not that I believe you need to treat coaches with reverence, but just in the context of what was going on, that was unnecessary.
I agree. I think the most inappropriate comments that I've ever heard of the press conference are actually about you from Tennessee football players, but that was a long time ago. So, John,
Well,
they were not happy about John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel at times in the Philip Fulmer transition, but we've moved forward. So,
transition, that's a nice euphemism for what happened. The guy got fired. Okay.
yeah, that is a fair point. So, Tennessee against Ball State, I mean, there are a ton of things you could look at that game. We could break down every single opponent, but mine is the thing I took away from that game really more than anything than yardage or stats is composure. I just thought Hendon Hooker from the top down on the offense looked very, very composed. The defense did what it had to do. They've been knocked for no sacks, but John, I just thought they lived up to the hype, which doesn't always happen in sports.
Yeah, in some ways, I thought Tennessee exceeded the hype because you mentioned Hendon Hooker's poise. That was very evident. I really liked the way the offensive line played, and I know that it's against Ball State, but it did make there weren't false starts. It was just a very efficient, businesslike performance, and we didn't see that in the opener last year. I think we see what another year of Josh Heupel's system means to these players. But overall, some of the younger guys played well. So you can't evaluate how good a team is by what it does against a Ball State. That's one of maybe the worst team in the MAC. If we can compare in a couple of weeks when Tennessee plays Akron, which also could be a candidate for worst team in the MAC. But overall, I just thought for a first game, Tennessee's offense looked really in sync, and that's a good sign because let's face it, this team's success really hinges on the offense. The defense has got to fans hope it plays better, but even if it doesn't, if the offense is really rolling, Tennessee can still beat a lot of teams.
Big Orange Philly is a great place to watch the game and games this weekend as Tennessee plays Pitt, but they'll have all of them on. And Big Orange Phillies is family friendly, so you can take the whole crew down there. It's North Knoxville on Maynardville Pike, very easy to find. I had the wings last time there. They are superb. The food is great across the board. And they've got billiards. They've got all kinds of things to have fun and keep you entertained and the kids entertained. They've got darts as well. So certainly check them out, Big Orange Phillies. But John, as far as the rankings, Tennessee ranked number 24. I was looking forward to this conversation partly because you've done the AP voting before, and you and I share the same sentiment about it. It should be pretty volatile, but I think most, if not 90% of the media members just kind of use it as a tiering system. You have to, win one game to move up. Talk about your approach, if you can, when you did the AP and voting over the top 25. And what did you think of Tennessee being in at 24?
I've done it about 15 times. I always, I think when you make your preseason top 25 and draw that up, I look at that as how I think the teams might finish. But I don't etch it in stone. I go every week. I think, as you mentioned, you need to jumble things up and evaluate on performance, not on what you thought. It's not as though you're married to that preseason top 25, and it's almost as though some guys are so insecure they think they've got to honor their picks. And if a team wins, if it's ranked number one and it wins, some voters leave it in number one. That's not the way it's supposed to be. For example, if you base on performance, competition, and so forth, Georgia should be number one in the country. I mean, it beat a nationally ranked team. Oregon was number 11. Maybe it was overrated, but based on the facts we know, that was a dominant performance. Yeah, Alabama was dominant too, but it wasn't against a team of that caliber. So I think Oregon will be a decent team. I just think Georgia was that good on that day. Doesn't mean Alabama. You still might think Alabama will win the national championship, but you do this on a week to week basis. As for Tennessee's ranking, that was pretty much expected because enough teams will lose. It was right on the fringe of the top 25 in preseason, so that was pretty obvious that would happen. Florida jumped into the top 25. Really doesn't mean much at this point.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't mean much at all. And ultimately, we'll see how the college football playoff decides to pick 12 teams. But right now, it doesn't really mean anything in the four. I mean, they could totally go off schedule and just hey, it doesn't have to be the top four ranked teams, and it wouldn't surprise me if that were to happen. We also haven't visited since the college football playoff goes to 12 teams. So before we get to Tennessee, your thoughts on the expansion? Who needs four? Let's just go right to 12. Lightning speed.
I know. I actually would prefer 8. Here's the thing, and I remember this from all the times I've done a top 25 poll. It's actually easier to pick the top 4 teams. It's much when you get down there and you're trying to choose between 12 and 13, 7 and 8's hard enough. That's why I would have prefer an 8 team. I think it's going to be really difficult when you get down to choosing 11, 12, and who doesn't make it. That will be very challenging. And I tell you what, if you look at it right now, SEC's got. I mean, SEC could have 4 teams in the top 12.
Yeah, it could theoretically have 5.
Yeah, depending on how good the league is or what happens during the season. But you're right. I mean, I don't know how the rest of college football is going to feel about it when the SEC puts 4 or 5 teams in the playoff.
Pitt is a much better team than Ball State. This just in, and Pitt is a football team that is way different than it was a year ago when they beat Tennessee. They don't have a first round NFL draft pick at quarterback. They don't have the Fred Biletnikoff award winner. And it's a team that runs more off play action. So, how much can Tennessee draw from last year's game in which Joe Milton started and Cooper Mays, the center, didn't play? This is just two totally different teams.
Yeah, back to Ball State for a second. A lot better. Yeah, a lot better. We could go down to a supermarket or Walmart or wherever and round up 22 people, probably be about as good as Ball State. Give us a week to practice and get our systems in place. Uh, Pitt is it. I think it's significant that you go back to last year. Tennessee played the wrong quarterback, at least started the wrong quarterback. It was just too good. It was just the second game with Heupel's system. It's playing at home, and it still beat Pittsburgh. Uh, Pittsburgh is not as good as it was last year offensively. Defense might be just as good, if not better. But I really like the way the matchups work out. Tennessee's offense against Pittsburgh's defense. Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi has played this way when he was a defensive coordinator at Michigan State. Takes a lot of chances. You saw that against West Virginia. It just says we're going after the quarterback. We're selling out. We're coming after him. Play man coverage on the outside. Take a lot of chances. Enforce big plays defensively. That can work sometimes. It can backfire other times. I think Tennessee has the right offense to capitalize on Pittsburgh's gambles.
Yeah, I also wonder about this offensive system that they're running, which produced some points against West Virginia, but I think there was also a couple of situations where Pitt's defense put them in great position to score. And John, when I look at the quarterback change from Kenny Pickett to Slovis, I see a significant drop off. And as far as a quarterback position, I think it's clear Tennessee has a market advantage.
I agree, and I never thought Slovis would be as good as Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett, I think, will be the Steelers' quarterback before the end of the season, maybe by midseason. He really competed and pushed for that starting job with Trubinsky. He passed Mason Rudolph, the veteran backup. So I look for him to be a really competent NFL quarterback. Slovis has some talent. He passed for over 300 yards against West Virginia, but he was slow getting rid of the ball. I think that's a problem. And again, we go back to Pitt's new offensive coordinator, Frank Cignetti. He's a power run guy first and then throw play action. That's completely different from the West Coast offense Pittsburgh ran last year. I don't know if this is the best offense for Slovis. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised he transferred to Pittsburgh. He does have a good arm, but you're right. I do think Pittsburgh might try and run more clock. Maybe an attempt to keep Tennessee's offense off the field, but talent-wise, particularly when you look at Pitt's defense, there's more. Pittsburgh is more NFL prospects on defense than Tennessee does on offense. But I just think the systems and the coaches' scheming will favor Tennessee, despite that talent disparity. Slight but significant in a way.
Like agreed. And when I look at Tennessee in the SEC stacked against the other teams in the SEC, I could make a strong argument they're the third best team in the SEC. Now, I say that there is a monstrous difference between the top two, Alabama and Georgia, and then there's about 10 other teams, or 8, that could make that argument at number 2. But if I made you pick the third best team in the SEC right now, based off what limited amount of play you've seen, where would you go?
I'd probably go Texas A&M, even though it opened with Sam Houston State and there wasn't a lot to discern there. I'm not sold on Haynes King being the quarterback. I still think Max Johnson could be the quarterback by the end of the year. However, A&M has a lot of talent, and I think it's better defensively, and it has some playmakers on offense. Tennessee, I would put Tennessee, but this is where I had Tennessee in preseason. I think Tennessee's the fourth best team right now. However, Florida was better than I thought. I didn't think it could beat Utah. In fact, I thought that was one of the best bets opening weekend, which is why I don't bet. Um, Utah, I thought, probably handed Florida that game. Nonetheless, Florida played really well, better than I expected. Kentucky looked better than I thought it would, even though it's playing Miami of Ohio, because it has more playmakers on offense than I expected. Some newcomers really came through offensively. So, but I think LSU's not as good as I thought it would be, and it lost Mason Smith, one of its best players, to a season-ending injury in that opener. Um, so, I guess South Carolina is probably not as good as I thought it would be. The offensive line was absolutely awful. I don't know why Spencer Rattler. He must not have watched that offensive line before he decided to transfer there from Oklahoma. So I think that's a good call. I think you can make a case for Tennessee being the third best team. We'll know more after the Pittsburgh game.
Agreed. Files Automotive Group is where you need to go for your next car purchase. Great selection, and they have just great service, but great integrity really is what makes them stand out there on Callahan Road. I just encourage you to stop by and check them out before you make your next car purchase. Well worth a look. Great group there. Big Orange Phillies is right there in North Knoxville. It's a Maynardville. Maynardville Pike, and it's very easy to find. So check them out. Big Orange Phillies. And did I say Maynardville, John? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. All right. So we're good to go. So the Big Orange Phillies has everything you need in terms of great food. They have a fantastic environment and it's family friendly. So it's awesome. So let me get your score prediction, John, as Tennessee plays Pitt at Pitt and roughly about a 5-point favorite.
Yeah, I thought the line might be a little lower than that, 3-4. People are obviously betting Tennessee. I would I pick it some points 41-34. That was the score last year. I'll pick the same thing. That way I don't have to think too much about it. Just reverse the winners and losers.
So I do go back to that game last year. Do you feel pretty certain that Tennessee beats Pitt if they start Hendon Hooker? I do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to project what would have happened. We're talking hypothetically. I think Kenny Pickett's really good. Was really good, and I thought Jordan Addison, their All-American receiver, was really good. Obviously, so if Kenny Pickett would have had to score more points, and Pitt had to score more points, I think it could have done it. I certainly think Tennessee would have had a better chance if it had started Hendon Hooker.
Great point. Not a slam dunk that Tennessee would have won. They still would have had a quarterback that is incredibly young. I think people just try to say that's a definite win if Hooker starts. I think that's oversimplifying things.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So he's John Adams. John, where can we follow your work? I know that not just the Knoxville News Sentinel, but out and about.
KnoxNews.com. You can check out my SEC podcast with Blake Topmeyer on KnoxNews.com also. SEC Unfiltered, it's called, and we break down the SEC from week to week.
He is John Adams. I'm Dave Hooker. We will talk to you next week, brought to you by Viles Automotive Group and Big Orange Phillies. This is a production of Off the Hook Sports.